Got Mathew Ingram on the line from the Globe and Mail, globetechnology.com. Thanks for joining us, Mathew.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I want to talk about iPods. Seems that all I ever do is talk about iPods and iPhones now. But the new iPod Touch, an amazing new iPod, which basically does away with the scroll wheel and is a complete touch screen.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about this sort of before we got on camera. It's not as though being able to touch the screen and make things happen hasn't existed for a long time. I mean, Palm has had devices where you use a stylus. Microsoft has had devices and other companies where you can use a stylus or your fingertip or whatever. It's not like that's a gigantic breakthrough, but to me, using the iPod Touch, the ability not just to use your finger, but to use the multi-touch, as they call it, where you sort of pinch with two fingers or you move your fingers apart and you can enlarge or shrink photos, you can enlarge or shrink web pages. It really is a substantial advancement, I think, in the sort of user interface. The click wheel, even the Pearl on the BlackBerry, those things are great, but that touch interface, even just being able to scroll a page with the flick of a fingertip, instead of having to, use a stylus or use a click wheel or scroll bar or something like that, is really, to me, it makes a huge difference. It sounds funny, but it does.
Well, it's kind of funny. You mentioned some of the other devices, the Palm, Microsoft Pocket PCs, and what have you. And yeah, the touchscreens have been around for forever. But I always find it funny that Apple can always take it to the next level. And you kind of wonder why no one really kind of thought of this before.
Well, and I guess the thing that struck me was the multi-touch, and admittedly that maybe wasn't even possible before, but even just scrolling with your finger easily or swiping and moving things sideways with your finger easily, like you flip through sort of records or you flip through pages of a book, that's something that shouldn't have taken this long. Do you know what I mean? In terms of like someone should have actually thought of that. But I think before, whether it was because designers were stuck with the stylus idea or they were just thinking about clicking, they were thinking in terms of a desktop. They were thinking of the way you interact with software on your desktop. You click with the mouse. You don't use your fingers. And it wasn't until somebody just sort of effectively stopped thinking about things in that way and started thinking about what makes sense for you to interact with a device using your fingers, what would be a natural motion, what would be a natural way of doing it, that I think they came up with something that is so revolutionary and yet so obvious.
Well, it's always interesting, when Apple comes out with these technologies, the whole world kind of follows behind them. It'll be interesting to see what type of devices will start coming out that to obviously mimic this type of touch technology and where they can take it.
Well, and you've already seen, there are devices that effectively look like the Touch. I think Samsung's coming out with one that's virtually identical. So I imagine you'll start to see touch becoming more and more a part of mobile devices. It's a sensible way to interact with the thing, to me at least, and we have the screen technology and so on that allows you to do that. But it'll be interesting to see whether anybody can kind of add something new as opposed to just knocking off what Apple does.
I'm just wondering, I love the touch interface. The only thing I'm still not used to, and this more applies to the actual iPhone, is using like an on-screen keyboard to type out things. I'm wondering where they can take that, because I don't know if that's fully there yet.
And I would agree. I mean, the keyboard, I think, is the one big flaw, if there is one, in both the iPhone and the Touch. It's just not, things you touch with your fingers like a regular keyboard or even a regular phone keypad, you get a certain tactile feedback that you don't get with a glossy screen. You just can't do it. And so you certainly can't type without looking at it, at least I can't, and not make any sense. And even the sort of visual cues they use to try and make it easier, I think it's not quite there for me.
Well, I'm sure Steve Jobs will have that figured out by version 2
no
of
doubt.
The Touch. Mathew, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Mathew Ingram from the Globe and Mail. You can check out more of his articles and also his blog at globetechnology.com.